Start the recording. So finally, we're back live. So good evening, everybody, and welcome. I'm Barbara Klein, currently with the League of Women Voters of Rogue Valley, where I am Action Chair. I serve on the LWV Oregon Action Committee and still serve on the National Popular Vote Task Force for LWVUS. Paula Lee, our co-host, and I'm just going to, yeah, good. Paula Lee, our co-host, is with the Sacramento, California League, where she serves as Advocacy Director. Additionally, she is VP and Legislative Director for Heber, Californians for Electoral Reform. And I also want to thank Marsha Watson from Minnesota and Lori Dawson from New York, who are helping out watching in the chat box tonight. So this meeting is sponsored by the LWV Sacramento, California, which sits on the lands of the Maidu and Miwok, and the League of Rogue Valley, Oregon, which is land of the Shasta people, and at this point, land of many fires as well. Our meetings or conversations are a grassroots effort for and by, or by and for, League members especially interested in alternative electoral reforms, particularly ranked choice voting. If you have League members interested in this who are not on the invitation list, please email me or Paula, and she will post our preferred email addresses in the chat box, at least at some point tonight. So tonight's theme, Conservative Voices on Ranked Choice Voting, is an attempt to demonstrate that RCV is truly a party-neutral issue, not only bipartisan, but multi-partisan. And I wanted to mention that when you registered, you might have noticed that it asked you if you had information or knowledge about ranked choice voting. And it was very interesting because many, many years ago, you know, the answer to that was always, what's ranked choice voting? And now, you know, I know the people on this list aren't the most representative of the public in general, but nevertheless, 95% of you said you were quite knowledgeable. So that's really good to know. So that everyone understands our agenda, I will introduce each speaker individually before they take about 5 to 8 minutes to talk about their work and interest in ranked choice voting. After that, we'll open it up for questions, and we may have a lot of people on the call tonight. It depends on how many people show up or of those that are registered. But we would like to keep this a conversation. And so we need to keep questions succinct, and we don't want to cut anyone off. So now on to the conversation with our impressive speakers. And I remind everyone that their bios were included in the original email if you want to go back and refer to them. The order of speakers this evening is simply that in which I received their information. And yes, Corey was first here, but he was also first on my list, so that's perfect. So I want to assure all the speakers, if we weren't on Zoom and we weren't all muted, which I hope everyone now is, that we would be clapping for them. So just a reminder, sometimes it's hard to play to a dead room, but believe me, we're all with you. So Corey Holdaway is the principal owner of KMH Consulting, which he, yes.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but before you start introducing Corey, I wanted just to let you know that Colleen Potter is on, she's showing up as the phone number. Oh, here, maybe this is going to work.
She may be not on with video. She may just be with number. I don't know. Let her in and see what happens. And then we will start with Corey once again.
Go ahead.
Okay. Corey is the principal owner of KMH Consulting, which he started after serving in the Utah legislature for 6 terms. His experience as a lobbyist and legislator gives him a unique understanding of the political process. He's seen as someone that works well with many different groups and divergent groups. He has always been active in the election reform community, currently serving as a founding member of the board of directors for Utah Ranked Choice Voting. He was on the board of directors for Vote Rise, an organization committed to increasing participation of young people and the underrepresented in the political process. KMH Consulting works with a variety of different clients, and I will refer you back to his bio for any of that information. And they are committed to the hard work and challenge of making good policy. So Corey, it's all yours.
Thank you very much, Barbara. I appreciate the opportunity in the audience to be able to visit with you all this afternoon. And let me just start out by giving you a little bit of a personal history. The area that I represented in the Utah legislature was an area that is considered a swing district. And having been elected for six terms from that swing district, I saw a lot of different things going on in elections. The one thing that struck me was the fact that at least in my elections early on, there was often attempts to recruit third-party candidates in order to pull off a percentage of voters from that would have possibly voted for me or another candidate in an effort to try and manipulate the election somewhat. And that always troubled me. And as I got more involved with ranked choice voting, I saw that that in itself is eliminated in districts such as mine. I had one election where I won with 48% of the vote, obviously not a majority, but because there were 2 third-party candidates in that election, about 6 percentage points were pulled off of the election. I won with 48, and the Democrat that was running against me won with, took the second place spot with obviously less than the 48. And so with that kind of precursor, that's one of the things that got me most excited about ranked choice voting, is that people could still vote for whomever they wanted to. And it really didn't matter whether or how someone was recruited or why someone was recruited. If a third-party candidate wanted, or a third-party voter wanted to vote for me as an example, the American Independent Party was looked at as further to the right. The Green Party obviously is looked further to the left. So often you've got political parties recruiting various candidates from the right or the left in order to affect that. So my point with that is that it wouldn't matter in my example of different elections, whether we had an American Independent candidate in that race and they pulled off 300 or 400 votes, as long as the opportunity to select or vote their second choice came into play. The other thing I want to just share with you is early in the 2000s, there was a convention, a Republican convention, and the Republican convention in Utah is an interesting experience if you're not familiar with it. You've got the political spectrum from very moderate Republicans to very far right Republicans. And it seems like, well, it didn't seem, the far right would often delay the business of conventions in order and delay the votes that were taken as long as they could possibly delay them in order to be able to just basically outlast the moderate Republicans that would come to a convention, so that their voice became much more important in any of the resolutions that would be passed as a platform stance, or even candidates possibly. So one of the conventions, we did I'll say a mock, not a mock, but a type of ranked choice voting or instant runoff voting, where rather than going through multiple times of having to vote after someone's knocked off a ballot, the delegates were asked to take positions on, or not positions, but to vote for individuals in the order of preference, as in an IRV. So I saw that as also beneficial, which then in 2016, we had a far right Republican and a far left Democrat sponsor some legislation in the Utah legislature to create a pilot program in Utah for running ranked choice voting in municipal elections. And I think Taylor or Colleen may visit a little bit more about that, but that gives you an idea of where I was at in terms of an interest with regard to IRV or ranked choice voting. And frankly, I think, as was coined by one of the county clerks in our state, I see ranked choice voting as better, faster, and cheaper. It's better because we avoid the gamesmanship. It's faster because we're able to get to the end product in a more concise and quicker way. And it's cheaper because you only have to run one election as opposed to multiple elections at different times. So with that, I'll turn it over to whoever is next on the agenda.
Thanks, Corey. Those practical experiences are really interesting, and hopefully people will have some more questions for you about that. And next is Jennifer Nassauer, and she's an attorney and political advisor living in Boston's Back Bay neighborhood. She campaigned to represent District 8 on the Boston City Council in 2019, advancing through a preliminary election to the runoff. Prior to running for public office, she served as CEO of Reflect Us, a nonpartisan coalition of the nation's leading women's representation organizations. That's a mouthful. She's also the founder of the Pocketbook Project, formerly Conservative Women for a Better Future, a nonprofit organization dedicated to electing more women in Massachusetts and the Northeast. For nearly 2 decades, Jennifer served as an attorney and also then elected chairman of the Massachusetts Republican Party in 2009 and 2011. She has focused on bipartisan efforts, engaging in constructive debates as an analyst on numerous national Boston area news programs. She currently serves on many boards, which you can see on her bio, including at the nonpartisan think tank Mass Inc., the Esplanade Association, the University of Massachusetts Women into Leadership Advisory Board Program, the Fair Vote National Board, and a vice president of the Union Club of Boston Board of Governors. Further history of serving on boards representing healthcare institutions, YMCA, and universities can be seen on her bio. Oof. There you go, Jennifer.
I need a little bit more of the paid category and a little less of the volunteer category, I think, when I listen to that. Well, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate all of you being here. And I don't know, I know I saw someone else who is on the East Coast. I saw someone from Vermont. So hey, all of us on in the Northeast and New England. Well, thank you again for having me. As Barbara said, I mean, I'm kind of a little bit of a unicorn out here. I'm a Republican in Massachusetts. Our Republican registration has sunk to an all-time low of 9.4%. We have a party chairman who makes the most conservative members of Congress look like they are Democrats. And we are definitely going in the wrong direction. And so, unfortunately, what happens is, regardless of your political persuasion, I would like to think that the majority of us really, truly believe in good democracy, and we want the best people elected to office. And so that is why I joined the National Board of Fair Vote, was because I truly believe in democracy. Even though I was party chairman of the Massachusetts Republican Party, I believed in a big tent. I had a fabulous relationship with the chair of the Democratic Party. I thought that it was really important for us to work together as chairs and not be hostile, because hopefully that would branch down to candidates. And I think that the way that democracy works best is by having people who are thoughtful and are respectful and are intellectuals that are elected to office that actually want to do something for the people they represent. Because at the end of the day, all of our elected officials, regardless of their party, are paid for by taxpayer dollars. They are our employees, and they really should be representing all of us. And so the reason I got interested in ranked choice voting to begin with was from my experience as party chair in Massachusetts. And what I started seeing was, in a lot of cases, I would have a really good candidate who is getting primaried by someone who I knew could not win in a general election. And we see it today over and over again. I see it in Massachusetts right now. We have someone who has lost in his race for a state Senate race. He lost in his race for US Senate. And now he wants to challenge our sitting governor, who is the most popular governor in the United States of America. And he can't win in a general election. And so we see this in our parties, but then we also see it in our states. In Massachusetts, like I said, 9.4% of our electorate are actually registered as Republicans. About 56%, we have this very odd system, and I don't know around the country who else has it, but they're not independents. We only have 3 registrations you can have in Massachusetts: Democrat, Republican, or unenrolled. So 56% of our electorate are actually unenrolled voters, which means that in the primary, they can decide that day if they want to vote for a Republican or if they want to vote for a Democrat. And as you can imagine, it's a lot more full and robust on the Democratic side than it is on the Republican side, which ends up leading us to having very conservative candidates that are on the ticket. It lands up having us in a position where Republicans have the least qualified person because the best qualified person doesn't have enough votes to even make it. And then as a whole, when we go out in a race in a general election, 2010, perfect example in Massachusetts. Like I said, Governor Charlie Baker, most popular governor in the United States. His popularity rating has been over 70% for the past 7 years that he's been in office. In 2010, when he ran for office, he was running against an incumbent Democrat who was mildly popular, but Baker was definitely on the upswing. The former treasurer in Massachusetts decided to run for election as governor, and he got 8% of the vote. He sunk Baker's candidacy, and we had to wait another 4 years in order to have Baker as our governor. In 2020, we see this again, and the race was a very popular contested Democratic primary for Congress. And there, I think, were about 7 to 10 people running for this congressional seat. A friend of mine and a fabulous woman, although our political beliefs, as I say to everyone, our political beliefs would never even be anywhere in the same stratosphere. My heart really believed that she would have been the best candidate for the job, lost to the more moderate candidate he won by 22%. So think about that. In a Democratic primary, the person who won election to Joe Kennedy's seat in Congress won by 22%. For some reason, that doesn't sit so well for me. It doesn't feel like democracy at work. And I think that we all deserve to have people in office that are getting 50%, that are the ones that people really want. And so I think where ranked choice voting comes in handy is you can absolutely vote for your first choice. And if that person wins by over 50%, great, all done, just like normal. But if that person gets 22%, then it gives the next person and the next person and the next person who you might really want an opportunity to slide up the scale and to actually be the person who's elected to office by the majority vote. And I think that is really good for democracy. So at the end of the day, again, my view on this is we need to be focused less on the partisanship in politics, less on the rhetoric, less on what we hear on MSNBC and CNN and Fox News, and more on what is good for us as society going forward. And if our elected officials won't elect themselves out of office by term limits, I think ranked choice voting is really the way to go. So thank you for having me.
Thanks, Jennifer, and stay around for questions as well. And I'm going to try to get Taylor up here so that, okay. Very good. Taylor Morgan is a founding partner of Morgan May Public Affairs. He has advised numerous municipal, legislative, and federal candidates and campaigns affiliated with both major political parties. He was instrumental in launching and leading innovative nonprofit organizations in Utah. Since 2013, Taylor has worked as the executive director of the Count My Vote Citizens Initiative campaign and chief consultant for its related political and policy activities to modernize elections and increase voter representation and participation, in Utah. Previously, he served in the office of the Utah Lieutenant Governor Greg Bell, where he specialized in election administration, legislative affairs, and communications. Prior to that, Taylor was senior staff working to promote voter participation for the Governor's Commission on Strengthening Utah's Democracy, managed national programs for the Hinckley Institute of Politics, and served as a professional staff member with the U.S. House of Representatives Committee on Foreign Affairs in Washington, D.C. So we're going to try to let Taylor take over from there and put Jennifer back in the queue for now. Thanks, Taylor.
I don't mind sharing a screen with Jennifer. It's making me look good here, so you can just keep it right there. So hello, everyone, and I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for the introduction. I'm thrilled to be a part of Utah Ranked Choice Voting. I've been involved with election reform, election modernization for most of my professional life, starting with working at the Hinckley Institute of Politics, more than a decade ago. When I was there, I became involved with the Governor's Commission on Strengthening Utah's Democracy, which took a close look at Utah's declining rates of voter participation. Utah, for decades, up until the late 90s, early 2000s, Utah had always been a top 5 or top 10 state in civic engagement and voter participation. And Utah had dropped to become a bottom 5 state in voter participation in the early 2000s. And so this commission, that was commissioned by former Utah Governor John Huntsman Jr., and then formally led by Governor Gary Herbert in his first term, we took a close look at the different issues and processes that were negatively impacting voter participation. And clearly the most obvious, I'll just go for the pun here and say elephant in the room, was the very restrictive, very exclusive caucus convention process, particularly in Utah's Republican Party, hence the pun, that excluded 95% of Utah voters from choosing or nominating candidates for the primary election. And by the time most elections, 95% of elections in Utah, by the time they got to the general election ballot, the decision had already been made by a very small percentage of delegates at convention, and voters just didn't feel like they had a voice. They didn't feel like they really were able to participate in that process. And so I became involved in the formative stages with an initiative group called Count My Vote. Count My Vote launched an initiative to reform Utah's primary partisan nominating process that would provide a signature gathering route for candidates to access a primary election ballot so that not all candidates were beholden to a very small group of party insider delegates. That initiative was set to pass back in 2014. We worked out a deal with the legislature that established the current lasting dual path that is called SB 54. And I have been involved with defending and protecting that. Unfortunately, it is an ongoing battle every year, but I'm proud to have been a part of that effort, and I'm excited now to be a part of ranked choice voting, because one of the real issues that we have with Count My Vote in primary election has been the fact that it's possible, and it's actually happened, where a candidate can win a primary with a plurality. A plurality means that a candidate who gets 32% of the vote, even if it's slightly more than the next candidate, that candidate will win the primary without a majority. So that is a lingering concern. And that's one of the reasons why I'm so excited to be involved with Utah ranked choice voting, because not only is ranked choice voting just a very common sense, practical elections process improvement, but it also is a perfect solution to ensure that we have a majority winner in all of our partisan primaries. And so Utah ranked choice voting is really the perfect fit for me to move forward with reforming, improving, and modernizing Utah's election process. And as a Republican here in Utah, and perhaps maybe some Utah Democrats might disagree with me, and we can fight it out. But I would argue that Utah has perhaps one of, if not the most progressive, inclusive, and modern election processes in the entire country. And ranked choice voting is the next step to make our elections even better. So with that, I will go ahead and mute and wait for any questions.
That was a great sales job. Thank you, Taylor. Very nice. Okay. Okay, and now we have you both. And Taylor, I'm gonna try to take you off of the spotlight if I can get down there quick enough. Okay. Okay, there we go. You know, here is a big no-no that you always want to avoid when you're introducing speakers, is to make sure you absolutely know how to say their name. And I have an introduction next, but now I realize, especially after listening to Corey, that I have been in my mind saying your name incorrectly. I think I have been saying Kay Ellen, but is it Kayleen?
It's Kelleen. It's like Kelly with an N, Kelleen.
Colleen. Okay. Oh gosh, and I have to say it 10 more times.
Okay.
Okay. For everyone here. Kayleen is mayor of Heber, Utah. She grew up in Ogden, Utah, and graduated from BYU with a degree in political science and secondary education. She taught government and history and also worked in Governor Levitt's administration as the director of elections. She got her MPA, which is public administration degree, through BYU, and worked as an adjunct professor of political science at the UVU Wasatch campus.
Wasatch, yeah.
Okay. Kayleen is currently in her 4th year as mayor of Heber and also serves on many boards and commissions, including Envision Utah, the Governor's Quality Growth Commission, and Heber Light and Power. She also works with the Utah Ranked Choice Voting and the National Ranked Choice Voting Resource Center, which we plug a lot on our meetings. So the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. It's so fun to be here with you. And I apologize that I'm in my car. This is what happens when you're a public servant and your daughter has to go to violin and someone drops the ball. So here I am in my car, my second office. I often do meetings from my car. So anyway, as you said, I worked, it was the early 90s and Utah elected a new governor, Republican, named Mike Leavitt. And when he took office, they decided they didn't need an election person in that office. And then shortly after, the motor voter law was passed. And a friend of mine came to me as a teacher and said, hey, would you come work in the governor's office? We need someone to do elections. And that is what started my education and passion for the electoral process. We implemented motor voter, we started mail-in voter registration. And for a conservative state, we were trying to do some progressive things to make the election process more accessible to everyone. And as mayor now, I care more. I'm one of those weird people. I care more about the process than that I get my way on issues, because I see this big picture as one of those people who cares about our democracy. And it's so important that we have fair processes that people can have faith in and want to participate in. And so I love the work that you do in the league. Our league people are out there talking about ranked choice voting at our city farmers market each week, and I'm so grateful for that. So anyway, when I had the opportunity to meet Stan, who is kind of we call him the grand poobah of Utah ranked choice voting. I was at a conference as mayor and started learning a little bit more about ranked choice voting. And Utah, in 2019, we had just 2 cities opt into our pilot project that I think Taylor or Corey referred to, how we had a bipartisan effort with probably one of the most extremely conservative and the most liberal legislators. They were able to get this pilot project adopted, and I was hired to help these 2 cities with implementation. And one of the things that was so powerful, I thought, with just these 2 small cities was I went to, on election day, I went where they were dropping in their mail-in ballots, and we did an after-election survey. And clearly the voters really liked it. It was an overwhelming number of people in the 90 percentiles that said, yes, we like this, we want to keep doing it. And since then, I've worked with the National Ranked Choice Voting Resource Center, helping them as a consultant, and now back with Utah Ranked Choice Voting, because we have 23 cities now in Utah who are using ranked choice voting for their November election this year. And one of the great things about it that I have noticed in my city is we have had, it seems like at least the last 2 elections, we've had a candidate withdraw when the ballots were already printed. And those candidates who withdrew got enough votes that it affected the outcome of the election in some small cities. And so something that we don't talk about as much is just the simple fact that if someone withdraws, no one's vote is wasted, that they're still able to get their second choice vote or wherever they land in the process. So that's something that I think is very, very valuable to the cities, along with just the fact that our system seems to create this polarization where we're artificially put in boxes, whether you're Republican or you're Democrat. And the assumption is that, we're all on this team and we have to all agree. And it's just not the way humans are. And ranked choice voting really gives us an opportunity to look at different issues and see what people believe. I just have a funny little anecdote that happened to me recently. We had a person coming to speak at our county council about a LGBT resource center for kids, but the room was packed with people who were there for a Second Amendment sanctuary item on the agenda. And they were talking about the virus, and you saw people shaking their heads and rolling their eyes, and you saw people protesting for guns. And then they started clapping for an LGBT resource center. And I think in our country, we've become so polarized where we think we know what everyone thinks. Well, if they like guns, they don't like this and they like that. And people just aren't like that. And I think ranked choice voting really, it doesn't it doesn't favor one side or the other, not conservative, not liberal, but it favors the voters. It favors getting the sense of what the electorate really wants and helping them most fully express their will as voters, not just saying, well, should I gamble and vote for this person? No, I get to vote for this person. And if they lose, that's fine. I didn't gamble. My vote still gets to apply for my second and third choice. And that's why I'm so passionate about ranked choice voting. I think it really does a better job of helping voters really be able to participate and express what they want in the outcome of an election. Thank you.
These were great overviews from all of you. Thank you so much. And we are going to go on to questions. In the meantime, Paula, could I ask you to add a spotlight to the other three speakers? And then we can get all four of them on the screen at the same time. And I am going to take the opportunity to ask the first question myself. And this really just struck me. And I hope it is not political as much as policy. So a couple weeks back, Rick Hassan, who is a national election law expert from Irvine, California, was on a webinar that I was watching. And I would like to quote and paraphrase points he made. He spoke of moderate Republicans needing a home. Many are being pushed out by what he called, not me, he called Trumpism, and mentioned a few such members he feared losing yet. In our current system, he said, they have little choice and they aren't going to vote for Democrats. He said that unless something is done, such Republicans and the traditional party will have a problem. One of the only hopes he suggested was allowing ranked choice voting, especially in primaries. And I am just hoping that all of you can maybe comment on that. Even if you didn't like his overview, if you could comment on the point about using ranked choice voting in the primaries that way.
I can hop in if someone else isn't first. Somebody recently said to me, Utah has 4 political parties and 3 of them are Republican. And I think that's sort of demonstrative of what you're saying. Like, there are clearly, a lot of Republicans in Utah, but I've talked to all people across the spectrum and they clearly don't all agree. But it's really difficult to start a new party. We've had people, there are other parties in Utah, but it's very difficult for them to win an election and get people to vote for them because they feel like, well, they don't have leadership positions and they won't have any influence. But when we have a state where there are a lot of Republicans who are divided on their opinions, I think this is ranked choice voting is the perfect way to be able to find the candidates within that party in a partisan primary who really represent the majority of the voters in that party.
Let me just jump in as well. I had kind of a unique situation during my elections. 4 of the elections that I ran, I had both a far right, I had a far right Republican running against me, who many people saw me as a moderate Republican. And coming into the campaign, it was a challenge because in the primary, at least in Utah, we would be challenged by the far. In my case, I was challenged by the far right because I wasn't viewed as Republican enough. And had that person, the far right person, won, then the Democrat would have faced a non-incumbent. And so, I've got a pretty strong opinion about being able to have a first and second choice, and the effects of the kind of the far edges of political of the political spectrum. So I think our ranked choice voting solves that problem in ways that we just are just beginning to understand.
Yeah, if I could jump in there too, I mean, I agree with the analysis. So I'll tell you, so I have a good friend who ran for US Senate back in 2018. a woman, very qualified, actually worked for Governor Romney as one of his, when Romney was governor here in Massachusetts, as one of his cabinet secretaries. She was the executive director of the Massachusetts Republican Party. She was the campaign manager of the successful race of Scott Brown when he ran for US Senate. I mean, a veteran who knew politics, knew campaigns, and just a wonderful, vivacious, smart woman, small business owner. Everyone likes her. She ran in a three-way primary for US Senate. This is against Elizabeth Warren, by the way. And who Scott Brown had lost to in 2012. So Beth Lindstrom goes and runs in this primary, three-way primary, 2 men and a woman in Democratic progressive Massachusetts. And she loses. She comes in 3rd place to both men. And the 1st place winner was, just like Corey was saying, very, very far right. He was the guy who I said now is challenging our very popular governor, couldn't win as dog catcher, but won the Republican primary because it was, well, maybe we should get this guy because he's so far over here. And those are the primary voters. And there wasn't another opportunity for them to rank their second choice. And I believe truly that if there was ranked choice voting here in Massachusetts, Beth Lindstrom would have been the winner in that case. And you would have gone on to a very competitive United States Senate race. Not that we could predict the outcomes, but again, it's good for democracy to see that and to have good debate instead of just having someone who's a lame duck because that's who the party picks.
Chandler?
I'll just add one quick point to that is with our state legislature, one of the dynamics at play that we have seen is that legislators want to be more accountable to the broad base of their voters, of their constituents. They want to better represent the majority of their constituents in their district, but they're always fearful of the very vocal minority on the extremes, regardless of the party. This is the case in both major parties here in Utah. And ranked choice voting is really, I think, the best way to make sure that the broad will of the voters in any district is represented at the ballot box. And with that, I think we will get more accountability from our policymakers, and we will get better policy that better represents the voters.
Right. Thank you, Paul. We had a couple early questions come in, and I just wanted to know if the members are on, if they want to ask them themselves. One was from Eileen Kahn. I think Eileen is on. Do you want to ask the question yourself? Unmute yourself if you do.
Sure. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I actually put it in the chat again, but I'll try to paraphrase it to simply say that we all know that New York's Democratic primary got off to a very rough start. The technology and miscounting 135,000 votes just kind of gave a black eye to ranked choice voting. Although we understand it's not a ranked choice voting problem. But there were so many candidates that the Democratic organization was able to give people, the city was able to give people brochures that explained all the candidates just for the mayor alone. And they had what we would call a debate, but that debate was a free fall. And it did not really, a free for all, did not serve the people. And had the 2 or 3 major candidates that would have been identified from the first round been selected to debate, it would have served the people of the city of New York who wanted to vote Democratic better. What are your thoughts?
Was there only one debate in that whole election cycle?
They may have had a couple debates, but if you put 6 or 7 or 8 people up on the platform, it gets to be very insignificant amount of information being shared. It's ridiculous. As you may recall with some of the presidential debates where we had so many candidates, they're not functional debates.
I think that's the beauty of ranked choice voting though, right? Because what it's supposed to do in a so first of all, let's just for those of us who have worked in state government and mayor, you know, you don't have to comment or shake your head on this, but for those of us that have worked in state government or in county governments, we have seen the failures and we know the people who maybe don't work to their maximum potential. So, you know, we're going to put that in a box over to the side. But what ranked choice voting is supposed to do is force all of those candidates. It's wonderful to have a debate and have them all on a debate stage, but what we want is we want them in the communities. We want them speaking to people. We want them out doing more of the community-based stuff. So I live in a district that was once represented by Mike Capuano. It's currently Ayanna Presley. I will give you a true life story. My daughter was in Girl Scouts. I'm in Capuano's district. I meet him in a green room one day. I said to him, "Oh, so funny, Mr. Congressman. He doesn't want to look at me. He doesn't want to pay attention to me," because I was the chairman of the Massachusetts Republican Party. Even though I'm a constituent, still doesn't want to talk to me. So, and I said, "My daughter received a letter from your office that called on the nasty Republicans in the House to work on climate change because it's all the Republicans' fault, has nothing to do with Democrats, and go talk to those lousy Republicans." I'm paraphrasing, but that's basically what he said. And so I said to him, "Ha ha ha, I just wanted to let you know I'm a constituent, and maybe you want to look at the voter rolls and see who lives in your district before you send out letters like that." So what it does, what ranked choice voting is supposed to do, is hold everyone accountable to every voter, because of ranked choice voting. Because even though Capuano might be on and it might be, you know, a Republican who's also on there, if you aren't talking to people outside of your own group, you're going to get booted out of office and the next person is going to get in. So I think that was supposed to be what was happening. And maybe it got a little confused because of COVID, but the candidates were supposed to be in the communities communicating with all the voters.
And I do think that's what a lot of the news cycles said that they were doing. So I think that it probably worked exactly the way you were just describing, Jennifer. Anybody else want to comment on that question? Okay.
Marcia commented in the chat that in Minnesota, they recommend a maximum of 6 choices on the ballot so that they can handle a field.
There has been some talk here in Utah to limit the number to the top 5, as in, for example, if you have 10 people running for the same office, limiting it to the top 5, I think there's some benefit to that. I personally see, just because once you get down to 3 or 4, I think you're going to hit the majority. Typically in a campaign, your top 5 candidates will rise above some of the lesser viable candidates, or your top 2 or 3 will rise to, and you'll be able to get to a majority with 5.
So if I can just add one point, I agree with Jennifer's points and the value of getting these candidates out in the community, engaging with voters, discussing the issues. And in ranked choice voting, that it's a format where it's more constructive, in my opinion. Candidates are incentivized to talk about themselves and talk about the issues rather than to simply just tear down another candidate. And when you have even more candidates in the field, that dynamic, I think, is even heightened. In Utah has actually had the second highest rate of voter participation increase between 2014 and 2020 in the entire country. And in my opinion, from what I've looked at, a big part of that has been in our new nominating process. We have had hundreds of candidates that now we're out there engaging with voters. They're going door to door to collect signatures. They're reaching out directly to voters in a way that they never did before. And so we have far more voters in both parties actively engaging with candidates and participating in the process. And to me, that is really an improvement in the system and in the in civic engagement. Yes, there's going to be challenges when you have a lot of candidates when it comes to something like a debate, but to me, that is on the periphery of the process. The process itself, the key is getting voters more involved, and I love the way ranked choice voting does that.
Great input. Thank you all. Another question came in early from Celeste Landry. Paula, do you know if Celeste is on the call?
I did not see her name.
Okay, if you are, Celeste, unmute yourself. Okay, somebody said she's not. All right. Why don't we go ahead and take questions from the chat? And if we have any time at the end, I'll come back to Celeste's question as well. It was mostly for the people in Utah. So,
Okay, there's a question for Jennifer specifically here. Why do you think ranked choice voting lost in your state?
I think people, well, I think there are a couple of things. I think that anything that was tested during 2020 is probably not a very fair analysis of what it was, because it was very difficult to talk to the average person on the street about the issue. So it had to be, very much media based, very much getting it out and on TV, and it was. I just think that Massachusetts, for anyone who has spent any time in Massachusetts, it's a very Puritan way of thinking. No one likes to change. No one likes change, rapid change. No one likes any change. If you went to the Cape from the time that you were in diapers, you still go to the Cape as, a gray-haired older person. You take the same roads, you have the same friends, and you live in the same town. So they're not very, very, for a very progressive state, it is very much old school in a lot of the thinking. And I think that ranked choice voting just didn't really have a great opportunity, because when you had COVID, we were completely shut down just up until a couple of weeks ago. And so I think it was just hard to communicate the message with a lot of people who were very resilient. We also, I don't know what the percentage is in other states, but I think we have some of the longest serving legislators anywhere. We have legislators that have been there for 30 years, 26 years, 24 years. And so no one wants to advocate for ranked choice voting because it might mean the end of their political career.
That's certainly universal. Kim Wells would like to hear about the voter education effort that was used in Utah when you were implementing the pilot program.
Yeah, we're still in the middle of implementation of that. I'm going to let Colleen talk a little bit about what we're doing this year, but what we have found in terms of voter education is, as people have learned about it, they've really liked it. They've liked the opportunity to be able to rank it. I think we all rank things every single day in terms of preference. So this year our challenge is a little greater. We went from 2 cities to 23, and the 2 cities that we had before were quite small. This year we're at about 40% of the state will be using ranked choice voting in their municipal elections in the 23 cities. So we've got some of the larger cities in the state that are going to be implementing it, and I'll let Mayor Potter talk a little bit more about that.
Thank you. So we're doing a full court press. We're trying every angle we want everyone to know what is going to be on their ballot before they receive it, so they don't see it and go, what is this? What are all these bubbles? But what we're doing, social media, Taylor and his partner, they've created these rank it elections for us, which I guess there was Fair Vote that had that program. But, we did one for my city when we were trying to get the council to pass it. And so you could say, what's the best place to eat in Heber? And so we're getting them to do some customized things that they can share on social media. The Lieutenant Governor's office is coming up with banners that they can put out. They have sample postcards that cities can mail, different kinds of flyers. Last time when we only had the 2 cities, we went to these cities when they had their summer events, like in Payson, the one city, they had a salmon supper, and we had a table and we would have little flyers and people could vote for their favorite candy bar, and then we'd give them the candy bar. And we aren't doing that as much this year, but the city recorders are, and they're trying to get out to city events. They're trying to put it in city newsletters. There will be an insert with the ballot when that comes in the mail. But we're also just trying to get out there on other venues. A couple of the cities have PIOs, the larger cities, and they're also putting extra money into the campaign to get the word out. What did I miss, Taylor? Maybe there's something else.
No, I think that's it. I think one point that's interesting is I wasn't involved directly in the 2019 municipal cycle, when we had 2 cities, Vineyard and Payson, both run ranked choice voting municipal elections. And excuse me, at that time, they actually visited I believe a senior home. Is that right, Corey? An
Yeah.
assisted facility.
Yeah.
And without any preparation or education or instruction, they just passed out sample ranked choice voting ballots to the folks there at that assisted living center, and asked them to, to go ahead and use the ballots and vote, and let them know during the process if they had any questions or didn't know how to do it, just as a test run. And it turned out that the vast majority had no problem. They understood the ballot. It was clear. It was common sense. They only 1 or 2 people actually had questions, and it was very successful. And I think, of course, Josh Daniels or Amelia could speak better to this, but their experience, the way I understand it, is that this is a natural thing for voters to rank things in life, right? I know what my favorite college football teams are in order, and I know what my least favorite ones are in order as well. I know what my favorite ice cream is in order, my favorite barbecue place. I think we think that way, we operate that way, and I think we as advocates, we can often fall into trap of feeling like we need to over-educate voters on the process, and sometimes I think we can scare them away a little bit. And a lot of times I think that sometimes our policymakers, our elected officials, will create fear using voter education, and I just don't believe that voters need a ton of instruction. I think the best way to get voters educated is just to implement ranked choice in cities. It's common sense. Voters understand it. It's very intuitive. And when voters try it, our data show that they love it and they want it used for all elections. And that's why our municipal pilot program is really the key to our long-term strategy. The more voters use it themselves, the more voters will want it in all elections here in Utah.
And one more thing to add to that is when we do our candidate training, we have Grace Ramsey, who does this nationally. Some of you may be familiar with her. One of the things that she teaches the candidates is most people are being educated about this by the candidates who are out there talking to people and saying, hey, pick me for your second choice if I'm not your first choice. So that's another thing. But along with Utah County going to the senior center, the resource center went to a middle school. And they found the same thing, that the error rate was no higher than any other ballot. And I think that kind of, at least in Utah, I think one of the reasons that you see conservative states less likely to adopt it is because conservative people don't like to change things. It's just like Massachusetts, like in that way, as far as like, well, we've always done it this way. It's worked fine. If the founding fathers didn't think of it, then there's no point in it. And, it's too hard for people. And I heard the same arguments over and over, but a lot of the cities, it was just more of this conservative feeling of like, we don't want to be first. We don't want to mess things up. And there was really a lot of the arguments against it in Utah came from our county clerks who really didn't have good arguments. It was kind of some of these same things about not being able to educate people or it being too confusing. And we see over and over that we all know how to rank our favorite things. We do it all the time. It's not rocket science.
Well, we didn't get to many of our questions, and I know there's still a couple more, but we did tell our speakers, especially Jennifer, who has girls she has to take care of, that we would keep to an hour, and I assume that we need to do that. There was one more question, if you would like to hear it, aside from the ones in the chat. Shall we go for it, or do you need to leave, Jennifer?
I can hang on for a little bit. Sorry,
Okay.
everyone. I'm on the East Coast, so it's
Yeah,
it's like past. It's a weird time for those of us that are on the East Coast, and dinner time. So I kind of punted that. But yeah, I can do another question. They can
gotcha.
wait.
And you're going to have to massage this question, and maybe we'll let you go first because it really is about Utah. But it says the current Utah pilot uses a multi-winner version of RCV called preferential block voting, which is not what most of us think of as proportional ranked choice voting. So for multi-winner elections outside of Utah, a proportional form of RCV is used, which is what I just said. It's called single transferable vote, or just proportional RCV. When the Utah pilot expires, will Utah ranked choice voting continue to advocate for preferential block voting, or shift to advocacy for the proportional form of RCV? And whatever your answer is, why? And Jennifer, if you want to weigh in on that before you leave us, okay. There you go, Utah people.
Let me take a first stab at that. The Utah model is what you're talking about is applicable only in multi-seat open races, and in a general election, obviously, that won't even come into play. I mean, it'd just be a traditional ranked choice voting preference. The only time it comes into play is when you've got, say, 3 city council races, and they're all at-large city council races, and the top 3 vote getters are the 3 elected people that take place. Utah's model is the flip side of RCV. Once somebody hits the 50% threshold, that person is pulled off the ballot, and then it's run again in order to be able to get to another 50% threshold for the next person's standing. So I think we're going to see how the pilot plays out over the course of the next 3 municipal elections, and then evaluate that accordingly. But that issue isn't an issue in one candidate races.
Right. Anybody else want to say something about that, or we good?
Yeah, I would just add that I don't know the percentage, but a lot of the cities who are participating this year, their city council races cover districts. So it wouldn't be an issue at all in those cities. My city, all the city council races are at large. So like Corey said, people will get to vote, and then the first two that get over 50% will be elected. It was a way, that was how it was adopted in Utah. I think there's always conversations around it and what needs to be changed and amended, and it'll be interesting to see if the legislature changes that or not. We'll see.
Okay. And before everybody gets off, and before we unmute ourselves and give you a round of applause, which we are going to do in a moment, does anybody have any final quick thought that they want to share with us about ranked choice voting?
It's better, faster, and cheaper.
That's right.
Well, there's agreement there. That's terrific. And now I will ask everybody, please unmute yourself and give all our speakers a hand, because it's hard playing in a dead room. So thank you very much. Yay.
Thank you.
So,
Thank you.
thanks to all of you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
And sorry for the questions we didn't get to, everybody.
Save the chat.
And save the chat.
Yeah.
Yes, please save the chat, because I also put a lot of information on in there on the Fair Representation Act, because there were questions on that. So everyone should save the chat. There's some good things in there. Great job.
Great. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.